My guest today is Mark Obert-Thorn, a name well known to collectors of classic reissues on labels such as Naxos, Pristine, and Music and Arts. Mark has been restoring old recordings for more than 25 years. I began our conversation by asking him why he does this kind of work. What is it that appeals to him about old recordings?
Well, I've always been attracted to the performances of the past. Part of it is that I've always had an interest in music, but the other part is I've always had an interest in history as well. And this is a way of bringing them together. And what fascinates me about the early days of the recording industry, especially my particular focus is on orchestral recordings of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, I would say, is the personalities that were involved in interpretation at that time, and the kinds, the kind of freer approach to interpretation that a lot of the major conductors had, and not just conductors, but soloists as well at that time. And the individuality that you would hear in performers and in orchestras too, that you could differentiate just from hearing a few bars between Stokowski's Philadelphia Orchestra, Krusevitsky's Boston Symphony, or Mengelberg's Concertgebouw. They all had very distinct sounds to them. And that, coupled with the more individualistic interpretations that we hear in those performances from that era, are what attracted me and made me want to share that interest with other people.
And we're talking about, for the most part, recordings that date from the days of 78s.
Yes.
A lot of people watching this interview will say, 78s, what are those? You know, they didn't have any around the house when they were growing up. Mm-hmm. You and I did.
Yes.
And that's how we got to know a lot of music. But you know, we've been through several technological changes mm-hmm. since then. The LP and long playing records, the technology for making a recording, as well as the delivery system. All these things have evolved and presumably got better, although there's still some dispute about the quality of digital recording. And many people say, well, it's supposed to be better, but we prefer the sound of the vinyl recordings. So where do you weigh in on some of these technological issues?
Well, the technological piece of it, it's just a means to an end. It's how you use that. And certainly the technology involved in the production of CDs has allowed the older kind of music to be transferred in a much more cleaned up form, and in fact the technology has enabled that cleaning up to a greater degree than it ever has been in the past. So in terms of the technology, it's just a means to an end. Now, in terms of the difference in the sound of recordings, which I think is one of the points that you're getting at, again, that's more of a function of the engineers involved, the producers involved, but also I think there's a point about analog technology, and I think that some of the best sounding recordings that were ever made were done from the mid-50s through the early 60s by engineers at EMI, for example, or at RCA Victor here in the States.
Yeah, for example, the great Chicago Symphony recordings
right.
with Reiner from the 50s. A lot of people point to those saying, well, how could it be better than that?
Yes, and I've asked sometimes people who are currently involved in the industry, well, why don't you go back to just hanging 3 mics and recording it analog without Dolby or anything like that, 30 IPS, and just having a very natural analog sound? And they say, well, we really can't do it that way anymore, and people wouldn't accept that, and so on. But I feel that we've lost something in terms of going to the more digital type of format for recordings in general.
What about CDs as compared to vinyl recordings?
Well, As someone who grew up with vinyl, and that's not someone coming to vinyl for the first time, as a lot of younger people are today, I welcomed CDs when they first came out because we didn't have to put up with pops and clicks and various other noises that came as part and parcel with the medium. But again, it's a matter of what's on the original recording. If the original recording was done analog, then if you master it in a good way, in a tasteful way, in a way that uses your ears to their fullest extent, and you can have something on the CD that accurately reflects the warmth of that analog technology. Of course, there have been a lot of bad masterings from even analog tape sources onto CD that emphasize more of a metallic kind of clarity in the recording that doesn't really reflect what it originally sounded like, and certainly not what it sounded like in the hall when it was being done.
I'm very excited about a recording that you've been working on lately, Stravinsky's Le Sacre du Printemps, conducted by the composer, recording made in Paris in 1929. Mm-hmm. But for a long time there were problems with this recording that prevented, I guess, re-release of the original recording. But it's coming out now on pristine, mm-hmm, classical, and perhaps you can speak a little about this, about the pitch deficiencies and what you had to do to solve these problems.
Well, a lot of late 1920s recordings made by the Columbia label in Europe have pitch inconsistencies where usually the pitch goes down toward the end of the side. In other words, the original recording platter was turning faster as you got to the center of the record. So in playback, it sounds like the pitch goes down, and it doesn't do so in a constant way. It does so in fits and starts, and sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's very gradual, and you won't notice it. Now, whenever I've had to transfer records like this in the past, what I've done is first to transfer each individual side, and I've copied it over to a CD, and I have a variable pitch CD player.
Yeah, we're talking about starting with 78s.
Starting with 78s.
How much music on each side?
About 4.5 minutes of music on each 12-inch side. And what I'll do is record the 78 side, clean it up, take the clicks and pops out as best I can, try and fix the equalization of it so that it sounds natural. And for these late 20s Columbia sides, what I've had to do is to repitch them, not just once at the beginning of the side for a pitch that would last for the entire side, but continually tweak them throughout the side. So what I've had to do is record each 4.5 minute segment by itself, copy it to a CD, play it back from my CD player, which has an adjustable pitch on it, back to my original recording drive, and adjust the pitch as I go. So for each side, what I've had to do is to rehearse what the pitch changes are. So I have a Korg autochromatic tuner with a built-in microphone, and basically it's a pitch machine that not only generates pitch if you want to hear a particular pitch, but also tells you how close you are to the pitch that is being played back. So I use that as a tool to adjust my pitch. So sometimes I'll spend maybe 15 minutes or a half hour just trying to notice where the pitch changes and what it has to be at this point. And my CD, adjustable pitch CD player, will give me differences, will allow me to make differences by tenths of a percent. So I'll say by 0.35 seconds into this side, I have to be at plus 0.01, and by 1 minute and 5 seconds it has to be plus 0.02, and so on throughout the entire side. So that's
really a painstaking process.
It's a painstaking process, and after I had recorded The Rite of Spring, there were still some parts of it where I couldn't catch all of the pitch changes, even doing a very painstaking process like this. Now, in the past, I would have had to just do my best and hope that people who aren't very sensitive to pitch wouldn't be listening to the results. But now we have a tool that's called Capstan. It's made by a European company and the purposes of the software is to analyze pitch differences and allow that to be adjusted automatically. So what I did in this case was, even though I had gone through this whole process and it took me several extra days of work to do this, I still wasn't satisfied with the way the pitch came out. So I asked Andrew Rose of Pristine Classical, who has this Capstan software, can you put it through this process to adjust the pitch even further so that for the first time we can hear it exactly the way that it was originally recorded. That's
amazing. Well, I look forward to hearing your work. And again, this is from 1929, Stravinsky himself conducting his own music, not so long after the premiere of the piece. So this is an invaluable historic document.
Yes, and not only was it just 16 years after the premiere, but it was done in the same hall, the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris. So you can hear this music in the hall in which it was originally heard.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really look forward to hearing it, and thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Paul.